And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Resource roads are typically 1- or 2-lane gravel roads built for industrial purposes to access natural resources in remote areas. Over 620,000 kilometers of roads in British Columbia land-based are considered resource roads. Resource roads are a highly valued part of BC's transportation network and are essential to economic development. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story about Cedarvale Road.
Now, on the west side of the Skeena, what is involved in developing that side, not only in terms of constructing the road, there's a lot of negotiations that have to go on beforehand. There are 5 Indian reserves on that side of the river. There's some 65 private property owners on that side, and there's going to have to be some negotiations between ourselves and the property owners and the natives on that side of the river to come to terms with access, as it were, as it affects their properties and their tenures. This will take us, we foresee, at least a minimum of 2 years to do these property negotiations. So it's timely that we begin now, let's say, with the reconnaissance work that we did, the formal engineering to know exactly where that line, that road will run, and then 2 years worth of property negotiations, and then construction on top of that, after that. So the road is not that eminent right now, but it could be in 3 or 4 years' time.
So the work got started with preliminary reconnaissance on the road access in October 1977, resulting in a completed access review report in March of this year. That report is available for public viewing at ranger stations and Forest Ministry offices throughout the area. Because there are 5 Indian Reserve lands involved and something over 60 private landowners, Bickert says the Forest Service is trying hard to keep public input on the project high.
Absolutely. One of the first things that I did was send a copy of this report to the Terrace Public Advisory Committee so that if local citizens or companies had heard about the report, that they could access the report rather quickly. It's a difficult thing to print up 100 copies of this and send it around to various people, but there is a copy available at the ranger station in Terrace and at Kitwangar. And with the Public Advisory Committee, I have a copy in the regional headquarter office, and my engineering section at Smithers have a copy.
Not everyone is going to be pleased with a logging road on this side of the Skeena. Many residents along the route are there largely because there is no road, no rush, no traffic, no disruption to the kind of rural lifestyle they have chosen. Others look to the increase in land values a road would provide, and access to schools and shopping and the like. Many perhaps wonder why, if the wood must be taken, it couldn't go out on the rail lines instead of building another road. That was one option considered.
And that report contained essentially 3 basic alternatives. And that was to develop that side of the Skeena either by a rail haul system or a bridge and branch road system, or a through road from Terrace through to Cedarvale. When the report was returned to this region, my engineering section and the timber management section and myself reviewed the report and came to the conclusion very quickly, Walt, that the main haul road alternative was by far the most logical and the most economical.
Yunus Mirza, in charge of the engineering for Regional Forest Ministry work, explained further why the railroad just wouldn't do.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. The BC government administers about 60,000 kilometers of Forest Service roads. FSRs are maintained by the forest industry under the road use permits, or where there's no industrial user responsible for maintenance, by the BC government. Let us return to the archives as Eunice Mursaw breaks down the costs of different transportation methods.
Just to give you a comparison, the West Side Road would cost us about $4.91 per cubic meter of wood. And bridging the Skeena and using Highway 16 would give us a total transportation cost of $5.05 per cubic meter. And the rail transportation, which is the most expensive, would cost $14.35 per cubic meter. So our choice logically was to go by a road system on the west side of Skeena.
Okay, is that the rail cost? Because it needs some explanation. The figure knocks me out when you go from $4.91 to $14.35. Is that just the handling, the reload in 3 or 4 locations? What is involved in jacking that up to $15 per cubic meter?
Yes, there are 3 things involved with it. For one, we have to still have branch roads to get into the tributaries to get the timber out. We also have some sort of main road to bring it to the sidings. Okay, so road cost is fairly high even if we do haul by rail. Secondly, we have to build sidings, in addition to whatever exists at present. That is additional cost. But the other additional cost, of course, is the handling, as you just mentioned, Walt. We have to bring the logs by trucks, have to store them at the sidings. When you have sufficient number of rail cars, you have to load them. So it's a double handling. That's additional cost. But the most expensive part we found by talking with the CN people was that the rail freight rates are extremely high when we compare to these 2 other alternatives.
So about $10 million will build 187 kilometers of road for the hauling. 66 kilometers from Terrace to Kitwanga, built by the Forest Service, and 121 kilometers of secondary feeder roads built by the forest companies that are harvesting the wood along the way.
With the figures you quoted for the amount of wood that's in there, based on present volumes of the mills in the immediate area, what sort of lease on life does this give those operations?
There is, for an individual company, I'm really guessing here now at this stage, we know that there's an operable volume of 14,876,000 cubic meter in there. It presents an operable wood supply for several operators, several licensees out of the Terrace area, and perhaps out of the Kitwangar-Hazelton area. Now, that sort of decision will come about when we have completed our timber supply analysis and we look at those public sustained yield units in terms of the new timber supply areas and try and determine which is the best direction for that wood to flow. Perhaps some of it on the east side should flow Hazeltonward, and perhaps the balance should flow terraceward. I don't think I can define here at this stage and say a certain percentage that will go to this company and a certain percentage will go to that company. Those are the sort of hard decisions that will come about when we've completed our timber supply analysis in about a year and 3/4 from now.
Bickert also notes the need for some provisions for small business involvement in any new timber allotments, but doubts the new access will create any new mills in the area. Beside construction lead time, right-of-way negotiation, timber allotment studies and such, there is also the environmental consideration. Plans for a relatively small patch of logging on Seven Sisters Mountain brought howls of protest last year from those concerned that clear cuts would scar the view and bring watershed problems. Here, we're talking about much larger cuts all along the area opposite Highway 16 beside the Skeena. Yet Bickert and his chief engineer feel that a proper approach to these problems can avoid much of the environmental protest.
Certainly at this stage, our ministry, and in conjunction with all of the other ministries, through the resource referral program, are getting together, and our planning is much better than it has been before. I might add that there's a lot of benefit to be gained from a road on that side. Certainly Canadian National Railroads will benefit from it in view of having easy access to their rail line for maintenance and upgrading. Certainly the residents who live on that side of the river will have an added benefit by being able to drive in and out by vehicle. So I think there's a lot of spin-off benefits, other resource benefits as it would be, rather than just timber extraction.
The road that is developed through there, will it be an access road for other than resource extraction? Is it going to be a generally available to the public commodity as well? Or?
Our main criteria at this stage, of course, is for timber extraction purposes as an industrial road. But in Forest Service, we generally leave our roads open for public access, for recreational access, and for other industrial developments, subject to closure, of course, as the regional manager may seem fit, basically from a safety point of view. Generally, these roads are kept open. I think we have done fair amount of work letting most of the people in the area know what we are doing. We have been in contact with the Indian bands. We had meetings with them, explaining to them what we are doing, what our purpose and need is there, and as Jack mentioned, we have already involved with the Public Advisory Committee. We have been in touch with the research director, I presume, of the town council. So we are fairly in touch with most of the people in the area. Yes.
And you expect that situation to continue throughout the planning and actual construction stage?
Very much so. Very much so. We definitely intend to keep everybody fully familiar of what we are doing. Yes.
The service does seem sincere about working the problems out early in the game. In the Kitselis area, preliminary road markers followed the old settlers' trail, bisecting a number of homesteads. Owners objected and approached the survey crews with constructive advice on alternate routes for the road.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. The business of search and rescue requires that staff members maintain a high technical standard of mountaineering and skiing skills. It also requires those individuals are capable of making sound, rational judgments to determine the most appropriate course of action when responding to incidents. Let us return to the archives to bring you this story from 1979.
It's a terror search and rescue group. It's sponsored by the Provincial Emergency Program. The equipment is mostly given to us by the Provincial Emergency Program. It's a provincially funded group. The fellas showed an interest in becoming involved in mountain rescue and having the ability to do some mountain climbing and getting back into the mountains in the event of accidents by hikers or climbers or that sort of thing. And I had a certain amount of experience mountaineering, so we got together and I agreed to run a course this spring, I guess. We started in April with about 10 fellows. We got together first part of April indoors and had a couple of sessions there, and then we got out on the rocks and we actually started the rope work, rope management, rock work. We've been out on the snow now in some of the avalanche chutes between here and Prince Rupert. They've had some experience in hauling people out of crevasses in the snow, and we've progressed quite a ways in the last 3 months.
What is some of the situations where you would have to perform this kind of operation?
Well, I think this is a typical situation where we have a young fellow that's been climbing on a rock face here, and he's got himself stuck in a situation where he can't go up now and he can't come down, and he's hurt himself, or he's just afraid to go any further, and now he needs somebody to come and help him down. And in this situation that we have here, we're simulating the situation where he's hurt, and it could have very well have been a rock climber or just a hiker, and they've fallen down the cliff and lodged themselves on the ledge, and the stretcher is being brought down on equipment that the mountaineer carries all the time. It's not specialized equipment other than the stretcher. We have the ropes that every mountaineer uses. We're using carabiners and slings and that every mountaineer uses, and we're not we're not using any specialized equipment at all, and it's an innovative type of rescue that we can do anywhere with the equipment that most mountaineers carry.
How important a factor is speed in the whole operation?
Well, you're looking at a person that's injured. Of course, it's to his benefit if we can get him off in a hurry, and that's the idea of this whole thing, is to have a trained group that can get to a situation. Now, we've trained this group here so that they can travel on ice and snow and over glaciers, and they're all now reasonably accomplished rock climbers, so that we can go just about anywhere, and the idea is to get him out of a situation and down to medical aid in a hurry.
Well, looking up there right now, I see 6 men, and there's 3 of them who are actively helping in lowering the stretcher. How many people do you have to perform an operation like this adequately?
Well, we could probably get away with 6, but if we're into a haul situation where we're bringing somebody up rather than lowering them, it takes 2 men, and what we've done is worked a pulley system at the top, and we can haul them with 2 men. We can haul them up absolutely sheer face. Lowering is 1 less. We can lower with 1 man, where we can't haul with just 1. And right now what they're doing is putting him in the stretcher. They'll strap him in the stretcher, and they'll bring him back the rest of the way. And we have protection at the top so that if one system fails, then they're caught on the second system.
Right now the weather is perfect. You don't have any rain to make for slippery conditions. What do you do in the event of rain or snow?
This surface, when it gets wet, is really hazardous. As you can see, there's some moss growing up there, and once that gets wet, it's very slick. But the rock face is a typical rock face that we might have to go down or go up. The man at the top is calling instructions to the people that are using the brake system at the top, and he's very important. He has to be able to see the operation and has to take signals from the people on the left and relay them to the people in the brake system.
What happens if one of the men in one of the key positions of the operation, something happens and he just can't perform any longer? Say he breaks his leg. What do you do then to compensate?
Well, they're all interchangeable. They can all take one another's place, and we usually have enough people around that can take one another's place, and they're pretty innovative.
What if you have more than one person trapped up there? Do you ever attempt to take down more than one down at a time?
No, we wouldn't attempt that. The system, we wouldn't want to strain the system and risk anybody's life or try to injure anybody. We would only bring one down at a time, and I guess then it would depend on who was the most seriously injured. Most of these people have had extensive first aid training and are capable of making that kind of a judgment.
All right, now he's down on the ground. What happens now?
Well, then from here to wherever. If he's not hurt, then we get him out of here and send him home, and if he is, we take him to wherever he has to be taken for medical treatment.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
If you love backpacking or just being outdoors, but always wanted to add something extra to the experience, then mountaineering is for you. Mountaineering itself is a relatively simple sport. Just make it to the top of a chosen mountain. In this final segment of Open Connection, Dick Latta shares his thoughts if you want to get into mountaineering.
When you want to start mountain climbing, what are some of the physical prerequisites? Do you have to have upper body strength, lower body strength?
Well, yes, you have to be physically fit. We started this program on the 1st of April with a couple of indoor sessions where the fellows learned the knots and a bit of rope management. Then we came out here onto these rocks, and the first thing we started was the basic rock climbing, and that's what we see here are some of the moves in rock climbing. He's the leader, and he's tied into a rope, and he'll work his way up the rock, and that's what the idea of the whole thing is. You have to be able to get to the injured party first, and all the fellows have had training in basic rock work now, and he's just looking for a route there. What he's going to do here now is he's going to put in what we call protection. He'll put a piton in the rock. He's looking for an appropriate place to put the piton in the rock, and he'll drive it in, and then he'll put a carabiner in it, and he'll run the rope through the carabiner, and that gives him a degree of protection.
What is a piton and what is a carabiner?
All right, the piton is a metal metal spike, I guess, and what they do is they're various sizes, and you search out a crack that fits the various type of piton that you're going to use, and you drive them into a crack in the rock, and the makeup of the piton jams in the crack and offers protection so that if you slip, you're held by the rope on the piton. The carabiner is a snap link that fits into the carabiner, or into the piton, and you run the rope through that.
Now what is he going to do after he links that up?
He'll clip the rope into it. He'll put a carabiner into the piton, and he'll clip the rope in. Then he'll continue on so that he can be belayed from the bottom, and the bottom man then can protect him so that if he slips and falls, he's caught on the rope. And that way, as they work up through the rock, they protect themselves. And when he gets to a safe spot further up on the rock, he'll bring the next guy up on the rope, and it progresses that way. You can see now that he's clipped the rope in behind him and the carabiner behind him, and he'll be belayed from below, and so that if he slips and falls now, the chap that's down at the bottom will catch him. And now he can only fall the length of that rope from where he is to the carabiner, and the length again that he is above it, so that he won't come all the way down. And that's the idea of mountain climbing or rock climbing.
You say you have to be in good shape. How fatigued do you get climbing up mountains? Like, how do you pace yourself?
Well, the idea when you're traveling in the mountains is to start out slowly and set pace, very slow, with the idea that you're going to probably have to go all day, and you travel very slowly, and you certainly have to be physically fit. We recommend that all the fellas that are participating in this type of thing are in real good physical shape. Once you get up over 10,000 feet, of course, the tells on you, a little less oxygen and that type of thing.
How long does it take to train someone to become a relatively accomplished mountain climber, or at least get to the point where they can perform a rescue operation as we saw earlier?
Well, we've been working since the 1st of April, but most of these fellows have been in the search and rescue group for a number of years. They've had a lot of exposure to the outdoors and that type of thing, but they have to keep at it. You just can't say, okay, now you're trained and that's it for the rest of the time. You have to keep at it, and what we recommend is that the fellows that are involved in the search and rescue group take the sport up, mountaineering up as a sport, become involved together and do trips into the mountains where they're actually doing mountaineering, and it becomes like any other sport, and then you take it on as a bit of a challenge, and you try to become better at it and better moves on the rock, and you work with each other until you become a team, and that's the idea.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.